Hi, I'm Tom Hunter, and this is my origin story.
Sir Tom Hunter, welcome to Origin Story.
Welcome to Blair, our home.
Thanks for having me. It's a distance away from Kiltwalk, isn't it?
It's a long way from Kiltwalk, but this is the whole of our foundation. This is where we base everything we do with our foundation.
Tell me about this place. Why did you purchase it?
So it may seem a strange thing for a foundation to buy a castle, and but through our work with Columba 1400 and their leader Norman Drummond, we had been putting every head teacher in Scotland through a leadership academy, and he kind of taught me the importance of place in all this. I was probably reluctant about putting philanthropic money into bricks and mortar, but he has got a place up in Skye and was renting a place in Loch Lomond, and he said it was really important when he got the teachers together that they could go to a special place, they could relax away from their day job and the day pressures of the job, and actually begin to think about why they went into teaching, etc. So the place in Loch Lomond got sold, and so he was looking for somewhere, and then we just decided that this would be good because we're doing things with the head teachers, with entrepreneurs. So they come here, they stay overnight. There's 20 bedrooms here, and we bring great speakers in to motivate, etc. But the real secret sauce of getting people together is the peer-to-peer support and learning. They build relationships, they build trust with each other. They're willing to, because every entrepreneur, if you ask them how's it going, they'll say, oh, it's going great. Whereas before that's not quite true. But if you build trust with someone, you can go, look, I'm really struggling with this. And they'll say, yeah, I have struggled with that as well. And, hopefully they can solve it together. So it's really a gathering place.
Your working skills have died for years and years. Some of the listeners might know that I always talk about your impact coming to my school when I was 11 years old. I remember these quotes so vividly. They've tattooed my brain, being a radiator, not a drain, and it's best to ask for forgiveness instead of seek permission.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's such a candid moment for me. Seeing you in your suit with your trainers on, giving that talk. Remember running back to my business class and giggling, what is an entrepreneur? What's a philanthropist? No results because I couldn't spell the two words. So the teacher came over and she googled your name, and I thought, oh, it's amazing. Someone who would have so much wealth that could give it all back. But that was never always the case, Tom. You come from a very humble abode in Newcombe. Tell me about the origin story.
Well, I mean, my dad was a local grocer in a little mining village in Ayrshire called Newcombe, which was maybe at that time 5,000 people. 90% of the male employment was down the pit, down the coal mines. And but my dad was a my hero, and I used to dump the shop, goodness, from age 6 perhaps, and just be with my dad and watch him, what he did, and through that, learned how to buy, how to sell, and that was a real education. People think you go to school for an education, and you do, but it's only one form of education. What happens out with the school is sometimes a lot more formative than what happens within the school. And therefore, I was always looking to buy things and sell things. But I think growing up in a small community like Newcombe, and you can't work these things out looking forward, only looking back. And but it had a big impact because my dad would, in his own small way, take care of the old folks' party or the bowling club or, whatever was going on in Newcombe. And he always used to say that these folks are our customers, so we got to take care of them as well, so we can keep being our customers. So big influence there. And if we move the movie on, it seems so long ago now, but 1984 was a miners' strike, and every miner in Scotland went on strike, and so it was a time of great upheaval for communities. It was terrible hardship on people in Newcombe, and the mines never reopened, and therefore it ripped the heart out of the community. My dad basically shut the shop. I thought he was a failure. Of course, he wasn't. And but out of that, he put a small amount of money into with another Cumnock businessman, selling shoes and slippers in indoor and outdoor markets. And I was off at university at the time, but I would look through the sales returns of these market stalls, and I noticed that trainers were a big thing. My goodness. And so I did my university degree. I only really went to university to please my dad.
What did you study, Tom?
Studied economics and marketing. But I didn't really want to go. I wanted to be out in the real world making real money. But I went to please my dad. He wanted me to go to university, so I did. But once I come out of university, I couldn't get a job. I think employers could see in me that I wasn't, an employee. I was basically unemployable. Not that I knew it at the time. I just thought, well. And I went on a course at Glasgow University then for unemployed graduates who wanted to start their own business. It was a very practical course. And you learned about cash flow and balance sheets. So that was really, really very, very interesting. And so anyway, nobody would give me the job. And a lot of entrepreneurs make their first start out of adversity, because I thought I would need to go and get a job and learn skills to do what I was going to do. I always knew I was going to do it for myself, but I didn't think I was going to do it straight off the bat. But anyway, nobody would give me the chance. So luckily, my girlfriend at the time could type. And so I said, right, make up a letterhead and we'll write to existing retailers on the high street saying that we noticed some space and they could sell my shoes, which I didn't have. So it was what's known in Scotland as a brass neck. So we did that, but we only wrote to two retailers. One was what everybody wants, they never replied. And the other was to a jeans retailer based in the northeast of England called Keen Jeans. I thought, trainers in jeans, wow, what a cool idea.
What year was this, Tom?
That was 84.
84.
84. And they wrote back to say, yeah, come and see us. We're in North Shields, Tyne-and-Mere. So I borrowed my dad's suit, his shirt, his tie, his car, everything, and I drove because I didn't have anything. I had an idea. That's what I had. And they said, all right, so, oh yes, I can get Nike and Reebok and Adidas. Okay. Well, they said, well, this is a great idea, and I'll put them in your shop. Your staff will sell them, and you take a commission on the sales and send me the balance. I don't know how I knew all that, but somehow I kind of came up with that. And amazingly, and I still remember the fella's name was Terry. Terry said, okay, Tom, let's do Leeds, Aberdeen and Sunderland. They had shops all over the place. But Leeds, Aberdeen and Sunderland. And I went, oh, right, just hang on a minute. My shop fitting teams, which I didn't have, are flat out. I'll need to come back to you with some dates. And I remember driving back up the 69, back up to my mum, and because I was living with my mum and dad, and saying to my dad, oh, listen, it's great news. They said yes, but I don't know what I'm doing. I've got no money. I've got no shoes. and they've given me a chance to get into 3 shops. So luckily, my dad could lend me £5,000, and I could write a business plan coming out of university. I knew how to write a business plan, and the bank loaned me £5,000, and off I went. But none of these suppliers in these days would supply me, because it was just at the start, I suppose, of the athleisure boom. But in those days, Adidas was saying, "Oh, we're in the sports business," and the retired local footballer would have a sports shop, and he would be the only one who would get Adidas. So I was a disruptor. So I had to go and buy the shoes wherever I could. And I basically did that. I bought a van. My dad's car was chucked out his garage. That was now my warehouse. And off I went. And the big lesson from those days, David, was, and it's something that we coach here all the time to entrepreneurs, is learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people, in my opinion, wait until, the last sale of a spreadsheet, or we've got the right font colour, or we've just go and try it. What's the worst that could happen? So I was definitely learning by doing, because I'd never done it before. And had a lot of luck in that I'd chosen a market that was really growing. And now I didn't know that. That was pure luck. And off we went in my old van, going to Leeds, Aberdeen and Sunderland every week, and buying shoes in the Rosendale Valley along the way. So yeah, that was the start.
You hear a lot of successful entrepreneurs always have this self-belief that they have at a young age that they will be a millionaire or a billionaire. Did you have that notion when you were that age, when you were faking it before you made it?
Yeah. My material goal, and I think we should all have material goals. Let's not kid on about it. I wanted a Guards Red Porsche 911. That's what I wanted. I didn't know about a millionaire or anything like that, but that's what. Remember, I was living with my mum and dad, and I managed to get that just before my 30th birthday. But that was my material goal. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I set myself that.
When you achieved it, how did it feel?
Yeah, I remember picking up the car. It was a second-hand one, and it had a huge clutch, and Porsches, I'm sure, still do. And trying to press the clutch out of your left foot was murder. So it wasn't quite. The car was beautiful, but wasn't quite the driving experience I was maybe thinking about. Yeah.
Going back to your story, it took you multiple years to then get your first own retail unit. Some people may think it was an overnight success. Can you tell me about the journey from scaling from faking it until you make it, until having your first bricks and mortar retailer?
Yeah, well, first of all, it took 5 years. And that's 5 years I was on my own. So I was buying the shoes, I was delivering the shoes, I was doing the invoices, I was doing the VAT return. It's a very lonely time. That was the toughest part in business for me. Now, luckily, I had my dad. And the other thing that we coach the entrepreneurs here is they need someone. And that's why we kind of bring them together, hoping they'll build relationships to make sure that they don't think they're the loneliest person in the world and they're facing challenges that nobody in the world's ever faced before. Once you've got a community, once you can speak to someone honestly to say, I'm really stuck. Because most entrepreneurs don't want to say that. When I say that, is great. And he knows not. So those 5 years were the hardest 5 years in business for me, for sure. But I was building up cash. I was still staying with mom and dad, so I didn't have any overheads. But I was working hard, 7 days a week, 18-hour days. But it was good. It was good fun, And but I was just getting into more and more of other people's stores but I knew I wanted to open my own store. So it just took time. It took time. 5 years.
Are there any particular habits that you remember that you had, or perhaps attitudes that you might have had then that those around you who maybe were in your university class or from you coming seemed to not have had, but you did, which made you a breakaway success?
Well, I mean, I had a huge work ethic. It was no problem for me working 7 days a week. And maybe that wasn't normal. Maybe it's not normal now. But I could outwork most people. That's for sure. And I had a huge passion. I wanted to know everything that was going on and who else was doing well in this business. And, so I was a real anorak for facts and figures. But I loved it. I had a huge passion for it. It wasn't like work for me. It was, it was early mornings and late nights, but, I was working towards something.
Were you competitive in nature?
So this is something which I suppose other people would say I'm very competitive. I don't really see it in myself. But sure, I wanted to do well.
I just remember the story when you were scaling sports division, you approached Olympus Sports and you wanted to buy them and they said, no, we'll buy you. And you went, no, we'll buy you. And lo and behold, you did. I just feel there was such a competitive undertone to that story, which I loved.
So I guess, anybody from the outside looking in would say, I was very competitive. And I suppose in business I was, although I don't, it's not something I think about a lot. But I wanted to do well. I wanted to prove people wrong. I really enjoyed the culture once we began to be able to afford to employ people was us against the world. That was a real culture we were building. And that just came naturally, or you can't have a national chain of shops based in Dundonald. Where just watch us, So if someone told me I could do something, I was pretty competitive to prove them wrong.
How did you attract a team of A players to join you on that mission? Is there any specific traits that you looked out for?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And of course, you can have a great small business by doing it yourself. But if you want to build a big business, you got to bring people along on the journey with you. And at one of the scale-up events for our entrepreneurs last week here, I had one of my right-hand men came along. He told the story of sports division. But I bumped into, his name was John Kinnaird, and he'd had his own business, and I'd put shoes in his shop. But, just bumping into people, it sounds so random and happenstance, and it wasn't those days. But, I convinced John to stop having his own business and come with me because the opportunity was so much bigger. And then we got a guy called Ian Grabina who had worked. So he was the one, because John had been his own boss. I was doing this for the first time. But Ian had been trained by Littlewoods and River Island, etc. And we convinced him to join us. And it was basically the three of us grew that business.
Was you part of, is it Arcadia Group with Phil Green? Yeah.
Yeah.
How important was that relationship during that time with Philip Green?
So, as we grew and we began to open our own shops, and then we began, cause it's only footwear in these days, and then I bumped into somebody who said, oh, they saw shell suits. What's a shell suit? I didn't know what a shell suit was. And they said, well, this is a shell suit. But we ended up being Europe's biggest seller of shell suits. What if I hadn't bumped into that person? Strange. So as the business grew, Ian had been an area manager for River Island, and I had shoes in his shops. And that's how we got to know each other. And then he left, became managing director of What Everyone Wants, and then Philip Green bought it. And Ian said, "You've got to come and meet my new boss." And I'd never met him like Philip before. He was larger than life, and deals here, deals there. And so, I mean, again, when Olympus wouldn't take me seriously, I went to Philip, So what if I hadn't bumped into him? All this happenstance. And I just put it down to you. You just got to turn up. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm a bit tired. I don't want to go to that event tonight." And the way up, you got to go. You never know who you bump it. And because I had met Philip said, "Yeah, leave it to me." And, that's basically what happened. They took him seriously. They wouldn't take me seriously.
At what point or what scale was sports division at that point? What are some of the numbers in terms of revenue, profit, like number of stores or people employed? What level were you at that point?
Yeah, so this is going forward to 1995. So about 11 years since I started. We're turning over about 36 million. And we'd paid back all our borrowing. We were making about 4 million of profit. And we had about 800 people. And life was good. But I had this burning ambition to be number one. And Olympus were the biggest, but they were losing 14 million. And but once Philip had worked his magic with them, I then borrowed the money because Philip didn't have any money. So I had to borrow the money. I had to put my house up for collateral, which my wife didn't do. However, she still does. And
Linda, don't worry.
So overnight, we went to a company turning over 36 million to turning over 350 million. We went from 800 people to 7,500 people. And we went from making 4 to losing 10. Now, you're an accountant.
Yeah, I know the maths.
So you do the maths. And
what was the grand vision? Did you know you could turn it around? And
yeah, I understood the levers in my business. I understood the sales per square foot, the margin I was making the product, and my cost percentage. And I knew Olympus's, and I knew if I could get Olympus's sales per square foot to pretty much about 85% of sports divisions, if I could get the gross margin to go up to not as good as sports division, a couple of points off that, and if I could get our cost control to about the same, then we were in the money. So I knew these numbers inside out. And in any business, these are your value levers. These are the things that really make a difference. People say, "Well, how do you, there's so much going on." Yeah, you got to focus. So these 3 things were the huge value levers in that business.
how did the complexity of problems increase from your one-man band, fake it till you make it store, to now acquiring number one retailer in your industry? How did the complexity of problems scale, and how did you know you were able to deal with them?
So I didn't know what I didn't know. I was learning by doing, but at super scale. And
Especially when your house is on the line, right?
yeah, I mean, what Philip Green had done, he was a brilliant deal doer. And I mean, it's the first deal I'd ever done. Well, and I didn't really do it, he did it. And but what he had negotiated with the top company of Olympus, which was Sears, was that they're the board of directors, very highly paid people. And it's, we didn't like us, we had a put back onto the organisation of these people at no cost within the first 6 months. So I thought, right, I'll go down and I'll really learn from these people because they really know what it's for. And we interviewed them all on the first night, Ian Blabinga and myself. And at the end of the night, we went to the pub, Ian and I said, "Oh, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, they all seem to be telling us we don't really know what we're doing. But they're the ones that are losing 14 and we're making 4. And I said, "Yeah, that's good. I thought it would be different to this." So I slept on it. We woke up next morning, got them all in, and a phrase I borrowed from Sir Alex Ferguson. I got them all in and I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do without you, but I'm going to give it a go. You're all sacked." Which may have seemed a rash thing to do, and I did think about it, but I had a very successful business. My people would have questioned my ability if I had let these people carry on, because they were responsible for 14 million losses, and they would have dragged us down. So it's better to cut and say to my people, right, let's step up here.
How important is human capital in a business?
I mean, it's everything, you know. And you say, what was the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge in any growing business is the people. How do you get it right? You know, who could do better? How can you get more out of people? Do they all share your vision? Are they passionate? Are you driving them all mad? But that was another important lesson for me, in that, you know, it was a gut feel to let them go. And I really did believe that they would have dragged the rest of us down if I'd let them stay about.
You described yourself that decision is rash. I'm guessing there's a bunch of people who wouldn't have the confidence or the drive or the laser focused vision to make that call and deliver it with empathy or without empathy, or just sticking to that decision. Do you think there are any traits in you that allow you to do that?
It's very hard to look at yourself and describe yourself. I think that's down to us.
Yeah.
But once I thought about it, I was sure. It's like once I saw Olympus, I had no doubt that we were going to do it. Oh, I put my house in the line. And I hope that doesn't come across as arrogance. And you'll say, "Well, how did you know, Tom? You've never done it before." And I'll say, "You're right." But I knew it, and I had real faith in my team. And they all stepped up, and they all loved it. And they all loved David and Goliath. And yeah. So, listen, we were very lucky.
And what was the payoff of that? Where did you grow the business to?
So the business, over the next 3 years, we basically turned it round. So we went from losing 10 million to making about 35 million. So a 45 million turnaround in profit. And at that point, we were the biggest independent sports retailer in Europe, and number 1 in the UK. And the number 2 in the UK was JGB, started by another self-made guy called Dave Rulin. And Dave came and said, because we had flirted with maybe floating, but had decided it wasn't for me. And but he heard about this and he said, "Well, look, I noticed you pulled the float. Do you want to sell?" And and Had and I were big competitors. And I said, "Well, no, I'll buy you." That was the real story. It wasn't Olympus, it was JJB. And then I was at an entrepreneurial exchange conference in St Andrews, and I remember going back to the bedroom myself and just thinking, goodness, do I want to sell this? And I'd never thought about it before. But within 30 minutes, I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I don't know why. I still to this day don't know why. And I phoned them back and I said, "Right, come and see me." And he did.
What was your quality of life like before you made that sale? operating that business, turning over the amounts that you were, I would imagine you were still having a nice life doing those things. And the sale obviously increased your quality of life, but it didn't come from a place of desperation, I can't imagine.
No, I mean, I had a great life before, I had a great life after. I never thought about it. I wasn't doing it. I mean, I didn't think about quality of life. Not something I ever thought about.
Given that you had grown this as your baby from one-man band and then you sold it, what was going through your mind day one after the sale, after it was out of your hands?
Well, it was actually very sad because I knew that Dave was going to move the whole operation to Wigan. And therefore, we had built up very good jobs here in Ayrshire. I'm from Ayrshire. I was proud of that. And I knew those people were going to lose their jobs. So it certainly wasn't, oh, wow, I've just cashed my check for, 250 million. And I got a lot of shit in the paper because of the job losses, etc. But I knew I wasn't running away, but the papers didn't know that. So it was actually a very, listen, I'm not looking for sympathy, but it wasn't a happy time.
How do you deal with that negative press? Do you need to be self-assured about your own mission to deflect that?
Chip Peter to none.
I can imagine when you're given a check like that, you have so many people chapping at your door, trying to advise you what to do next. What did you do next and how did you come to that resolve?
Yeah, it's very interesting when that's the only thing you've ever done and now you're not doing it. And I was very clear, it was Dave Whelan's business now, and I wasn't any part of it. And that was correct. That's why I got the money. And so I do remember my dad, Julianne, who's been with me 36 years now, the three of us rented a small office in Ayr because my wife put up with me for one day in the house and I jammed the telephone lines. She chucked me out. So we had a little office in Ayr and we just kind of sat there and looked at each other and said, what are they going to do? And so yeah, it was like start again time, and I knew I had to educate myself. I was only 37 years old. So I was young, 2 young kids. This couldn't be it. That's usually the end of someone's life. This was, hardly started for me. So I basically travelled and I spoke to as many people as I could about, and mainly in America, because there wasn't that many people in Britain, very few in Scotland who did what I had done, and not at such a young age. Say, well, what happens next? How do you do it? So my wife and I made some big decisions then. We wanted to stay living in Scotland. We didn't want to go and avoid our taxes somewhere else. We wanted to give our kids a Scottish upbringing.
Why was that important?
Just because we absolutely felt my wife's from a council house, and she wanted to bring the kids up, and I did, as normal as we could. Can it be normal? I don't know, but we weren't going to go to somewhere like Monaco, which wouldn't be normal. But if we brought them up in Scotland, perhaps they had a chance of coming out all right. And thank God they have. Thank God they have.
So what did you learn from America over your time there?
So I'd become interested in Andrew Carnegie. I'd visited Skibo Castle, which was Andrew Carnegie's home in Scotland. And Carnegie's story is one of having to leave Scotland with his parents when he was about 8 years old out of abject poverty, and they just got on a boat and ended up in Pittsburgh in America. And anyway, a long story short, Carnegie becomes the richest man in the world. But he is such a his writings of the time, this is, kind of 1900, he developed US Steel and he sold it to JP Morgan, John Pierpont Morgan. And they were very competitive. And I remember Carnegie writing time that after the really tough negotiation, because it made him the richest man in the world, JP Morgan said to him, well, I would have paid you more. And Carnegie went, yeah, I would have taken less. So even with all that money, it was still there. And Carnegie worked out that, his famous saying is, ego dies, rich dies disgrace. To basically do something with your money while you're still here. And that really affected me. And I went to New York and I knocked on the door of the Carnegie Corporation in New York. And I met a saint of a man. Again, I bumped into a man who changed my life called Vatan Gregorian, who was the president there. And he became my philanthropic mentor. And I knocked his door. He took me in. You listened to our story.
What are some of the key themes or takeaways that you learned from him directly? He's no longer with us, is he?
No, he passed away a couple of years ago. He was a trustee of the Hunter Foundation. And I used to see him every time I was in New York, and he came here. Not that often, but he did come here. And so I think Vatan's kind of challenges was you've come into such wealth and you got to find a purpose. It's not really yours, which I find hard to accept. But, having this amount of wealth in one person's hands or one family's hands, you got to find out to do something good with it. That was the overarching thing, because he was learning from Carnegie.
And you and your wife developed the Hunter Foundation as a result. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, that was basically it, so the decisions we made was to live in Scotland. We decided we weren't going to leave our kids great wealth. I still wanted to be in business because I loved the people and the cut and the thrust, but we wanted to do good, so we set up the Hunter Foundation. And we decided the money we're going to make from the business would go into the foundation. And that's still what's happening today, all these years later.
Is the term venture philanthropy, is that what it's called? How do you describe that?
So, again, I had never been a philanthropist. So what did I do? I learned by doing. And what had I learned? I learned in business, that you find great people, you back them, you drip feed your money in, you don't put it all in a winner. That's basically what we did in our philanthropy. We're backing great people, great ideas, but we're saying, all right, David, this is what you want to do. It's going to take 3 years. Where are you going to be at month 6, 12, 18? And we'll put the money in against KPIs as we go. So it's just like a business. That's it. That seemed simple to me.
What are some of the success stories that you've seen through the Hunter Foundation?
Well, I mean, we're putting every head teacher in Scotland through the Leadership Academy with Norman Drummond at Columba. I mean, that's just amazing, because the one thing about education is the thing that can lift any child, regardless of race, colour, creed, and or ability, is quality of the teacher. And I'm sure we all remember a teacher. I remember a teacher that influenced me. I'm sure you do. And therefore, take care of your teachers. Take care of them. The other huge thing that we've been involved with in the Hunter Foundation is a Kiltwalk. I've just come from a Kiltwalk board this morning, and we've been in charge of it for 10 years now, and the numbers are quite extraordinary. We've raised £54 million for over 4,000 different Scottish charities. So it's just phenomenal.
It's amazing. It really is. I remember reading an article whereby you were asked to be removed from the rich list when you were titled Scotland's first homegrown billionaire and you're on the rich list. Why was it important for you to be removed from that, or asked to be removed from it?
Well, and the rich list has just come out again, and if you notice the thing against my name, I'm still on it, is that my ambition is to be off this list. Because my ambition now is not to grow more money for myself, is to grow and make money for the foundation. And therefore, we are giving the money away. We're not, my family doesn't need any more money.
In the public domain, billionaires and millionaires at large get such a bad rap. Do you think that's a worthy title that the public have placed on this group of people, or do you think there are, like yourself, people out there who
That deserve it? I think there's a big misunderstanding. But I would like to attract more people like that to Scotland, because then they will come here, they will build their businesses. We've got a saying in the Hunter Foundation, the best social policy ever written is a decent paid job. And who creates the jobs? It's people like you, it's entrepreneurs. And therefore, if we can attract more of them into Scotland, not less, some people are saying, well, a non-Dob's leaving Britain. Good riddance. I think it just don't understand, If, for every non-Dom who leaves Britain, I want them to come to Scotland. And I really would like the tax regime to attract them to Scotland. But, some of the big names who have left Britain, they are paying the equivalent of 90,000 families' benefits. So who are going to pay those families' benefits now? So I think people have got to get a bit of a reality check on good riddance. Okay, who's going to pay the benefits now?
I agree with you. I was supported by the benefit system growing up, both my mother and my father, for various reasons, where my whole livelihood is supported by that initiative. And yeah, I can believe more in that sentiment.
And of course, those with the broadest shoulders carry the heaviest burden. I get it. But you can keep going back to that well too much. So I think where we are in Britain today, we're driving entrepreneurs, wealth creators out of the country. They're going to live in Dubai. They're going to live in Monaco. And I think it's wrong.
Do you think we have the entrepreneurial talent here in Scotland at the moment? We used to be the envy of the world with the John Logie Baird, Alexander Graham Bell. Penicillin is here. Do you think we still have that raw talent here, or do you think there's a skill shortage?
So, from the entrepreneurs we see coming through our scale-up programs, I'm always heartened when I see them, the diversity of business and the enthusiasm the entrepreneurs and the founders bring to their businesses. But we could be doing better. We definitely could.
As Scotland's first homegrown billionaire, what's your answer to the question, does money make you happy?
It does if you give it away.
That's the most Sir Tom Hunter answer ever. I love it. Oh, that's brilliant. We see Elon Musk over in the States assemble his Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, and then your friend over here, James Watt, is doing his shadow version. If Sir Tom Hunter were to develop his own Doge, would he? And who would he assemble?
So, I think it's needed in the Scottish government. I think it's needed in the Westminster government. But my style is not so much as confrontation as to bring people along with me. So explain what we're trying to do and get people to buy into it. Now, there'll be some who won't buy into it because the system suits them. But of course, we could be doing things more efficient in Scotland. Planning permissions. We just did a report looking at Singapore versus Scotland. It takes 5 times as long to get planning for a warehouse in Scotland as Singapore. So that's 5 times longer. We're not employing the people. They're not paying their taxes. They're not having the multiplier effect in the economy. So for sure, we could be doing things more efficiently, but you got to bring people with you, and that's more my style. So would I do it? I'd love to do it.
I read your report and I've listened to you on the news over the last couple of days. And one of the things that stood out for me was the salary of Singapore's, is it president over there? Prime Minister over there, and it's something like $2 million.
$2.2 million.
$2.2 million. Here in Scotland, the First Minister's paid 150,000.
65,000.
Do you think that has the ability to attract the right skills and talent into that role?
So, it's a very stark contrast, first of all. And money is one thing to attract people into a job, isn't it? And why wouldn't we want the best people running the country? It's the hardest job. I remember sitting in China 10 years ago and with a bunch of academics, all very, very clever Chinese academics who'd all been American educated but come back, and they were the sharpest academics that I'd ever met. And once we warmed up to each other, because they're a little bit wary to start with, and this stuck with me for, all these years. And they said, first of all, we want the best people running our country. What do you want? We want the brightest. And it's the hardest job to run a Scotland. So why would you want, we'll have the 100th best person doing that job? It doesn't make any sense. And then they also said that the NHS was going to bust Britain. That's all those years ago. He said, you can't afford it, it's unsustainable. Well, maybe they were right about that as well.
Have you ever thought about going into politics or leading the country, Sir Tom?
No. I don't have the skills for that. I know what my skill set is, and it's not in politics.
What is something that is surprisingly cheap that you place infinite amounts of value on?
Time.
Are you wary of time?
Hugely. As you know, but you wanted to come, Julianne pinned you down.
Do you mean that in the micro and the macro?
I've got a lot to do and I want to fit it in, and I can't have people stealing my time. Not that I'm choosing you.
If you had infinite amounts of time, where would you spend your time?
Oh, goodness. Having infinite amount of anything's probably not a good thing. But, I can choose to spend my time, I've become a granddad. I've got 3 great kids, being a granddad's amazing. So, the family, I probably wasn't there on the way up. So I'm making time for that now.
Can anyone, regardless of their socioeconomic background, be charitable?
Yeah, because they've got time. And you can volunteer. That's being charitable, So absolutely. It's not all about money.
If you were to go back and start again and hand over a set of skills or attitudes that you wish you had to begin with, would you change anything?
No. Further change it.
Preaching to my 27-year-old self, what skills would you recommend that I obtain, especially in this kind of digital, AI-driven revolution? Is there anything that I should be putting my focus at?
I mean, my success is down to the people I bumped into along the way. You've heard me say it. I bumped into them, changed my life. So whatever you can do to be out in the world, and you're good at it, networking, you managed to get in here. You managed to get in here with a door. So, because you just never know who you're going to bump into. And it might just change your life. Then for me.
When it's all said and done for you, Sir Tom,
Oh, come on. There's still a bit to go.
In terms of complete retirement, what would that look like?
No, I couldn't do it. I love what I do. I mean, most people see retirement as stopping something they don't really like, but they had to do, and doing something they want to. I'm doing what I want every day. Why would I retire from that?
What would you like to be remembered for?
Making Scotland a bit better than I found it.
Well, I just want to say, as a personal testimony to you, you're doing that. The reason I wanted to do this podcast was to be a spokesperson for the vast amount of people that you don't see that you've impacted. I'm just a very visible account. I've given hundreds of talks around the country, hundreds of podcasts. And like I said at the beginning of this, I always attribute it back to one sliding door moment, which was you.
And to me, there you go.
Yeah, and now I try to be almost a spokesperson or custodian for that for so many other people. So I just want to say thank you for holding that door open for me and allowing many others to walk through it.
It's a pleasure.
Sir Tom Hunter, thanks for coming on Origin Story.
Thank you.